All right, and here we go. My name is Josh Ortega, speaking here with. Could you introduce yourself and what your business is?
Sure. My name's Marcus Tork. My business is a pure drinking water company, and we serve customers who refill their own containers. Ours is it's a standalone kiosk kind of a model. So a little same basic processes and concept as a water store, but ours are actually a drive up model, and so we're serving customers through the Phoenix area with pure drinking water.
How long have you been in this business? Because I think what makes somebody want to get into this business, and how long have you been in it?
It's I've been in it for it'll be 30 years in about another 6 months, so quite a bit of time. And the founders of our company got into it literally as kind of concerned citizens who had some experience in some of the components of what they put together. So the, they started out their own experience in Colorado and small agricultural community, kind of like the town of Buckeye has been historically here. Smaller rural town, and they had some issues with groundwater, and they were getting from their municipality, from their town, notices that they needed to boil their water, and some warnings that for new mothers, nursing mothers, and the elderly who may have any kind of compromised immune system, that they wanted to be careful and might even want to go buy their drinking water. And they decided that they wanted to do something for their town as a solution. And so they came up with the first of this kind of drive up, walk up water purification kiosk there as a response to that local concern. And over time, they found out that there were some other places in a number of different states that had water quality issues too, and so they looked at just expanding that business model. And I actually started right out of college. I'd done some other work going through high school and college, building houses, and was looking for just I wanted experience doing something else. Had a background through schooling in just some of the basics in water treatment, as well as um, land use planning and that kind of thing, which um, has been helpful a little bit just in terms of getting the stations put into place. I'm working with city planners a fair amount of the time, and so there's just knowing what they were looking for. That was a helpful background to have, and I've stayed with it. It's a super interesting line of work. It's a super interesting service model in terms of I go to bed at night, and what did I do? Well, hopefully I help some people get their hands on some good, really highly filtered water,
And
which is
that's
just good for health and hydration.
I'm glad you say filtered because that's something I've always found interesting is the water filtration process has been a really big issue. It's been a really big topic here in Arizona with, I think your model is reverse osmosis, which as far as I know is probably one of the best, in my experience, one of the best methods for filtering water. And there's Brita filters and there's others, and I know there's well, I mean, we should backtrack. Explain for those who don't really understand. Here in Arizona, it's a desert. Water is very precious, and
Right.
there's even rumors that it's illegal. I think it's illegal to deny someone water or something. I don't know.
Yes.
There's been articles on it, and some news outlets said that law doesn't exist. But I mean, it just goes to show the importance of water here in Arizona. So I guess explain what the water situation is here in Arizona currently and where it stems from.
Okay. Um, so broadly, and jump in as you've got any questions where I'm not really quite answering your question totally, but so the issue is very broadly because it's so hot here for a lot of the year, and also because it's dry. Um, just kind of regular hydration for anybody, just person on the street. We need to drink more water because we're in this environment than we would in a lot of, certainly in the eastern United States. So you've got that in terms of all of us are looking to drink a little bit more water than the average bear in the U.S. Just for climate. And then particular to Arizona and a lot of the Mountain West states, a lot of us are getting our water from the Colorado River watershed. That water is going, it's carved the Grand Canyon. It's going through a lot of rock and mineral as it's traveling to us. And so the water in a lot of Arizona and the Phoenix area in particular, it's very hard. So there's a high, and it's, calcium, magnesium, and iron. So it's things that, they're not necessarily a health problem. Although you get too much of it, and you're probably more likely than other people to get kidney stones. But we've got water hardness as a particular issue for our water here, just for all of us. It's hard on appliances. It's hard on your sink fixtures. Sometimes we just have to replace sink fixtures because they get calcified. Shower faucets, a lot of people will notice, the holes in your shower faucet will gum up with calcium, and it's just for the extra hardness in the water. And then, especially in Phoenix and other big cities, they've got a huge task of meeting the safe drinking water standards and building and maintaining an infrastructure to get water for all of us to drink, to wash our clothes and dishes with, to irrigate our plants with, through a huge network. And of course, all of our water pipes are, for the most part, buried underground. It's a huge network system. And one of the challenges in that kind of system, wherever you would build it, so this isn't a Phoenix specific thing, but you got a city that's so spread out, they've got to put chlorine in the water, or they have to do something to make sure that water is disinfected when it leaves the plant, and then it remains disinfected until it gets to what they'll call sometimes in the water world and other things, the last mile. So you go from the plant in Phoenix, and there may be somebody that lives 5, 6, 8 miles away from the plant. There's got to be enough chlorine at the plant level so that when it travels 8 miles through all these distribution pipes and gets through your meter and into your house at your faucet, it still has sufficient chlorine so that water is safe to drink, and there's enough chlorine content that you don't have bacterial growth and things like that could be not good for your health.
Like, so chlorine, kind of like what? Because I hear chlorine, I think like swimming pools, something like that, or
right.
What? How's that? I didn't that.
It's the same concept, same principle. Generally speaking, so we've got a lot of municipalities in the Phoenix area, so it's almost at a treatment plant by treatment plant basis. But broadly speaking, it's the same chlorine that they're using in pools. The concentration amounts are different between a swimming pool and municipal drinking water. So it's same basic principles, same chemical in a lot of cases, different dosing levels between the two. So you're not drinking necessarily pool water, although it's the same.
That's what I figured. The parts per million, or however they measure it, as you said, the concentration level is different. So, but sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So in Phoenix, particularly, just because I've spent so much time here now, almost 3 decades, just in talking to people on the street and talking to our customers who use our stations, one of the big things that they're concerned about is there are many who are concerned with their health, and so they just want a more highly filtered water than what they're going to get out of a tap. The other thing, there's a lot of people who don't like the taste, and they may or may not also have health considerations, but they say, I don't like the taste, I don't like the smell, I can smell something. That's typically the chlorine. If you notice an odor, that's going to be chlorine. And so you've got a lot of people who, despite the fact that it meets safe drinking water standards, they're just looking for a higher level of filtration and a higher level of purity. So more water, less other stuff in the water, less hardness, and less of the chlorine in it. And so that's kind of the need, whether you were talking about bottled water off of the shelf in a grocery store, a water store, or a self-serve refill station like we operate. That's what's kind of driving people in the Phoenix area to go take these options instead of their tap. Is they're just looking for a higher level of filtration that would be. This is something that goes back to at least probably the 1950s. In the U.S., the kind of the engineers who drive water filtration looked at it and they said, look, there's a couple of ways we can go. We can do really high quality water like you would get in a bottled water or from a water store, or we can do something that is acceptable, that meets basic health standards, but also is less costly to get to that somewhat lower standard because people are washing their cars with it. They're power washing their house or whatever they do with it. They're washing vehicles off and they're watering their yard. We don't need ultra fine purified water for people to water their landscaping with. And so there were these cost trade-offs. And so they said, look, we could run parallel systems, and we could have the ultra filtered pipes, and we could have the wash your car and irrigate your landscaping pipes, but your cost is nearly double because you got to run twice the pipe, you've got to maintain it over time. And so what they came up with was, let's make it to some basic minimal health standards, but not as high as we could do because of the mixed use, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, yeah, that definitely does make sense. And I mean, the industry, everybody's always said, America is unique in that, bottled water it's such a luxury here in America, whereas
Right.
other parts of the world they can barely have it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Mr. Beast he basically drilled a well water for villages in Africa, and some people are actually mad about that. And I'm like, that's for one, that's a very charitable thing of him to do, and it's such a simple thing. We're here in America, I mean, the entire water industry is just so people don't understand enough about it, and I think, and just what you're explaining, the origins of it, really, it's it's amazing that we could have had two lines, but I mean, I'm sure it was government that basically said,
Right.
it was cheaper to just run one line and have a minimal health standard. And I mean, even Joe Rogan talks about fluoride in water and the effects of that. And I mean, it to me, it almost comes back to government, wanting to meet the minimum standard of a lot of things and say, yes, we've done this and we've done that. And there's a couple of stories that I'm gonna share here. So this is just a story from KJZZ talking about, is it illegal to deny someone water in Arizona? And I mean, it's interesting to see that it looks like there really is they don't mention a source, but the one thing that struck me, going back to the fact that Arizona gets its water from the Colorado River, given that it's a landlocked state, is this right here. Like, it's most of the river from the Colorado doesn't go to Arizona. It goes to obviously the state of Colorado and California. And I think the one thing that I found really interesting was that Arizona is that's all I hear is people talk about cutting back and we have to conserve our water. And yet I'm a lifelong, I grew up in California. I was born and raised in San Diego. And I've never really heard of us talking about water cuts and really, I don't know, maybe it's just my experience, but it's not something that is the doom and gloom. Could you explain that?
Uh, you just your experience of not having heard much about the conservation side.
Yeah, and just like, why is it that, I mean, I don't know, we can talk about do you want me to bring back the articles again?
Your preference.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
I'm just, it's just interesting to me. And just talk
yeah,
about the water crisis, as they like to say here in Arizona. What is that?
that's a it's interesting. So there's what I think we all hear, which is that there is a water crisis, and we it's not it's not just a water concern. It tends to be pitched as a water crisis. Um, we definitely want to be. We're a a good chunk of Arizona is a desert state. If you get into northern, they get more rainfall and it's greener. But a lot of the populated areas is very much a desert state. It's arid. We're bringing water in by a canal from the Colorado River. So in some sense, it's kind of for Arizonans, not when you were in California, but as Arizonans, it's kind of the most common sense thing in the world that we want to be good stewards with the water. It's clear that it's not abundant because it doesn't rain. We've got 340 days a year of sunshine and those kind of things. So that's kind of a normal part. That's definitely a piece of things. If for any of us that live in Arizona, um, we've got agriculture as a main industry. You've got the 4 or 5 C's in Arizona. Cattle and cotton are a couple of them. Uh, Cattle take some water. Cotton takes a decent amount of water to grow, um, and yet it's also part of Arizonans' livelihood. So there's it's not about not using it. It's about just using it as responsibly as we can and as efficiently as we can. Some of the things that I don't see get talked about quite as much are we do hear that we're in a drought cycle. Um, and sometimes it almost seems like the level of concern about that doesn't doesn't totally factor in that they are cycles. Um, it's hard to tell for sure. I don't think any of us know, including the people who point out that we're in a water crisis, what we're talking about necessarily. So there's a fairly historic 25 to 35 year drought cycle for the kind of the mountain southwest of the United States. So I think we're about 25 years in, 25 plus years into a drought cycle. So one of the questions that I don't hear touched on very much by some of the experts is, are we approaching maybe kind of a natural cyclical end of the drought cycle, and are we approaching another period where we're likely to see more precipitation and start to maybe recharge what we perceive as deficits just from listening to a general news cycle. Um, that doesn't get touched on, and I had to look up myself. What's the what is the drought cycle? How long do the drought cycles tend to be? The information's out there, but it takes a little bit more digging and research to see it. So if we're at a 35-year mark, we may well be approaching a time when we do have more precipitation than we've had recently, which would be a big help. We still want to be good stewards of the resource, um, but it probably doesn't sell newspapers and airtime as well. To say there may be some normal cycle here, and help may be on the way.
That's always a concern. I feel like it's the doom and gloom, the what is it? If it bleeds, it leads. The
Right.
the crisis news, and I mean, and we've been talking about, you and me have been talking about this for a while, and you sent me a few links. I don't know. I guess what which one of those links that you shared with me really stood out to you as one that's not being talked about as much? And I can share it. We can talk about it.
I think if you pick any one of the, I think there were three links that were all basically related to basically Colorado River water use and agreements between either Arizona or the U.S. and Mexico. That's a perfect one. That may have actually been the first one of its kind that I had come across, and then I did find a couple of others as well. These are really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. I mentioned my background in environmental land use and planning. So if I put that hat on and I'm looking from that lens, it's certainly the intent of what they're doing in terms of saying, let's work. We've got a watershed that serves a number of U.S. states. It serves the delta of the Colorado River. So now you're into Mexico,
Mhm.
and doing things where we manage that resource, and that the watershed is different than any of the political boundaries that it straddles and kind of is shared amongst. So this article, an interesting thing is just the fact that there's an attempt to plan based on the multiple states that happen to all share this resource. Um, the thing that really jumped out at me was I found it as I was looking for information on the water crisis. So relatively recently, and definitely inside of the current drought cycle, what's one of the things that we hear about? We see these pictures that hit all the headlines and hit the news broadcasts. Oh my gosh, look at how low Lake Powell and Lake Mead are. Look at this bathtub ring. You can see how low the water is. For me personally, as somebody reading and watching news, the implication when I see that is there's this terrible drought, and the drought is draining these huge reservoir lakes. Um, and it definitely, it's a visual that lines up with somebody that wants to talk about a crisis.
Mhm.
What was really interesting about this article and a couple others was there have been these planned additional compared to historic norms over our same drought cycle of releasing water from the reservoir, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, and releasing water that we didn't used to release so that we could establish higher flows and more water that ended up reaching the Colorado River Delta.
Is this the one this is the other article you're talking about, I think. It talks about,
That's the one.
yeah.
Yeah. And so uh, it's another question. I haven't teased out all the fine detail, and there's kind of an accounting that you end up doing with how many acre feet of water use is going to Arizona agriculture, to Arizona housing. How many acre feet have we additionally allocated to this river flow to get down to this to like San Luis is a town that's toward the end of that delta. Um, there
I'm
may be
familiar. I'm familiar with
great
it.
reasons to establish this flow, um, but just in terms of kind of like a more honest journalism that I would prefer, when you're telling us that we've got a crisis drought and you're showing me pictures of lake levels that are dropping, it's just good to understand a whole picture, in my opinion, to know that, one of the reasons that the lake levels are dropping is because we have begun releases that we weren't doing prior to, um, certainly prior to 2000. These are things that are kind of post the year 2000. Um, that's going to help. That's going to contribute to where the lake levels are. Now, if we're doing it for the right reasons and the right uses, it could be fine. But it's something that I wish I was seeing as in a lot more news coverage, was a part of the overall discussion to say, maybe um, if we're hitting a crisis point, what are we doing not only for conservation efforts um, by agriculture and by residential areas? Are we adjusting these flow levels that we've started doing again? Are we adjusting those to reflect drought conditions too?
What is,
It's just kind of an interesting piece that gets missed.
yeah, I mean, it's kind of an interesting, as you said, that I've never really even heard of that. And knowing that, one, California takes a lot of the water and they don't talk about that. And I mean, there was just another article where it said the drought might be over and there might be a lot of rain coming to California, but we should still be worried. And I mean, as you said, it is always good to conserve and to be good stewards to the land and
Yeah.
everything. But when we're spending it on things like draining it to feed a river delta where it's I believe it's a nature preserve that's down there by San
Yeah.
Luis. I'm pretty familiar with the area, but what message would you want to give to ordinary people out there, and what to know, to sort of feed their curiosity and to also, ask questions of their own government, of what they're doing with water. What message would you want to give to ordinary Arizonans and just ordinary people who live here in the desert Southwest?
I think it'd be just I think for a lot of people, just out of curiosity, we care about the place we live. We care about what's going on with it. And so I think when any of us have natural questions that pop up, it's good to follow those a little bit. There is a part that's just it's part of the business nature and part of different news outlets. They're trying to do things to get people's attention. It's how they keep their doors open. It's how they keep the broadcast going. It's how they keep the print press running. If there's still somebody that's doing print, so they have some business realities to the business of putting out news, and part of it is to get all of our attention with kind of eye-popping headlines. And as long as we know that, it's like what I think is safe to assume with the Arizona drought situation for sure is there's just a lot of detail that I think is kind of obvious when we just think through it. That I think a lot of the news outlets aren't going to cover because it's not going to get clicks, it's not going to get viewers necessarily, but it's a more full picture. So when we have natural questions, ask them, because I was really surprised at how quickly I started coming into finding these articles that explain what's going on with just Colorado River water usage and allocations and changes in allocation. So it's not, it's something that we could be doing. I'm way past grade school, but grade schoolers would really readily understand these pieces. So they're not being communicated because they're difficult. They're just kind of more time and effort and resource than I think some of the news headline people can give it. So ask the question about, well, where is all our water going? How's it allocated? How much of it's going to the river delta in San Luis that didn't used to? Are we being careful with that part while we're asking Arizonans to conserve water themselves? And then ask what are we doing and what can we do? And this is from the I think it's important to have hope and understand if we have solutions, what are they, and where are we at applying those solutions? And so that's things like we already see golf courses doing this in Arizona. Almost all the water that goes to golf courses is reclaimed gray water. So if you drive by and you didn't know any different, you might say, "Holy cow! In a desert, why are they wasting this water?" Well, they're using water that's already been used for other things. It's being treated to a level. It's just not dangerous, but you're not to drink it. They label it purple. so that you know this isn't drinking water.
Mm.
And they're
Is
doing
that,
something that creates a public amenity, and kind of a counterbalance to a heat island effect in a big desert metropolitan city. If you have some golf courses and some green spaces, um, you can be doing some smart things. And so golf courses, in my opinion, is a good thing to be doing by directing gray water so that we're not increasing water demand.
that's kind of like
Another one, go
the
ahead.
toilet to tap water that they're talking about recently, right? Is
Yeah,
that the same thing?
yeah, that's that's related. So yeah, they're talking about toilet to tap. Is that something that you've heard?
Yeah, and it's been on the radar because they want to basically put that into the tap into the drinking water that we drink from,
Yep.
as the name says, to our taps. And so, I mean, again, but back to what you were saying though about, really helping people understand, what this situation is. And I mean, we have a minute left here. What would you say? I guess what would you want to tell people about the issue overall? What is your main message?
Yeah. On toilet to tap specifically, as somebody that's dealt with purifying drinking water, toilet to tap, to me is it's a bad idea. It's going to be really hard to do at a city scale, and pull out what you can pull out by fine filtration, almost more at a point of use, or a point like where you're intending to just ingest it, and then you want really high quality drinking water. For a city to try to pull off toilet to tap, there's a lot of impurity in toilet wastewater. There's soap. There's a lot worse than soap. There is.
And we're back. Sorry about that technical
All
difficulty.
right.
So I
Good to
guess,
be back.
but what as you were saying before, I guess what is just your message to people about the water crisis in Arizona and just the overall issue of water as a utility here?
I'd say the big points are just to keep in mind that there's a cycle. We're probably getting near the end of it and back toward more precipitation than not, which is going to let us recharge some of the lakes and reservoirs. With specific to toilet to tap. My own personal opinion is it's just not a good idea. Letting like City of Phoenix does now with the Tres Rios project, about 99th Avenue and the Salt River. If you do the basic treatment on that and let it percolate down through the riverbed and into the soil, and if you need to, you can pull it back up as groundwater, but it's actually being filtered in that way, and then going back through a good extensive filtration process, because none of us want to be drinking just a lot of the extras that get added in water that's been run through households. Cleaning compounds, soaps, dishwashing detergents, kind of leftovers from pharmaceuticals that everybody takes. There's just a lot of stuff in there that trying to take that directly from that end of the pipe, there's a lot of filtration that costs a lot of money to do that, and letting it recharge groundwater first is just a lot better way, and then going back for drinking water to some good purification level, whether it's reverse osmosis, deionized water. Distilled water is not my favorite, but those are all, in terms of the purity level, a good way to get rid of things that you don't want in your body.
Marcus Tork, thank you very much, and thank you very much for sitting down with me and having a talk.
Okay, thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
All right, take care, everybody.